Jordan Mitchell set his water glass down so hard the ice cracked, then looked the richest woman in America dead in the eye and said the 7 words no one in that ballroom ever expected to hear. "Your money doesn't impress me at all." 300 people stopped breathing. Forks froze. A billionaire's smile vanished. Somewhere near the back, a champagne flute slipped and shattered against the marble floor. But here is what none of them knew. This widowed single father wasn't being cruel. He was about to change Victoria Hartwell's life forever, and his own along with it. Before we begin, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss how it ends. The 7 words hadn't even finished leaving Jordan Mitchell's mouth, and already he could feel the whole room turning on him. But to understand how a man ends up saying something like that to a billionaire in front of 300 people, you have to go back. Not far. Just to that same morning. Just to a small kitchen on the east side of the city, where the coffee was too weak, the toaster was broken, and an 8-year-old boy was refusing to eat his eggs. "I don't like them scrambled," Noah said. "Since when?" "Since forever." Jordan looked at his son across the little table. "You ate them scrambled yesterday." "That was yesterday me." Jordan almost laughed. He didn't, because if he laughed, Noah would win, and if Noah won, they'd be late, and if they were late, the whole day would come apart the way days sometimes did when you were doing everything alone. "Yesterday you," Jordan said, "was a lot easier to deal with. Yesterday you," Noah shot back, "made better eggs." That did it. Jordan laughed. He reached over and pushed the plate an inch closer to his son. "Eat. 3 bites. Then you can tell me every single thing you know about sharks for the rest of the drive, and I promise I won't stop you once." Noah considered this. It was a real negotiation to him. That was the thing about Noah. He treated the whole world like it was a serious business, like every promise was a contract, like every question deserved an honest answer. Jordan didn't know where the boy got it. Maybe from Rachel. Rachel had been like that too. "Deal," Noah said, and stuck out his small hand. Jordan shook it. His son had his mother's eyes, and every so often when the light came in a certain way, it was almost too much to look at. Rachel had been gone 3 years. 3 years, and Jordan still set 2 coffee cups out some mornings before he caught himself. 3 years, and he still turned to say something to her in the car before he remembered the passenger seat was empty. Grief, he had learned, wasn't a wall you climbed over once. It was a room you kept walking back into by accident, and every time the furniture was in the same place. Rachel had been an elementary school teacher. She used to say Jordan built the buildings, and she built the people who'd walk inside them. She said it like a joke, but she'd meant it. She had meant most of the soft things she said, which was rare in Jordan's experience. Then one autumn, she got tired. Just tired. And the doctors ran tests, and the tests turned into more tests, and by winter they were using a word Jordan refused to say out loud in the house because Noah was only 5 and didn't need to carry a word that heavy. By spring, she was gone. Jordan had been an architect. A good one, better than good if you ask the people he used to work with. He designed towers that changed skylines. He had a corner desk and a name people knew, and a future that looked like a straight road going up. Then Rachel died, and Jordan looked at that straight road going up, and he realized there was no one at the top of it he wanted to reach anymore. So he stepped off. He took smaller jobs. He turned down the big ones. When his old firm called with a project that would have had his name on the front of a magazine, Jordan said no, because the project was in another state for 11 months, and there was a boy at home who had already lost one parent and wasn't going to lose the other to an airport. People said he was throwing his career away. Jordan let them say it. He knew something they didn't: a career could wait. A childhood couldn't. You only got the one, and it went by in the time it took to break a toaster. "Dad," Noah's voice pulled him back. "You're doing the thing again." "What thing?" "The looking at nothing thing." Jordan blinked. "I wasn't looking at nothing. I was looking at your terrible table manners." Noah grinned egg on his chin, and Jordan reached over with a napkin and wiped it clean. And for 1 second, one clean second, the whole world was exactly the right size. Chen. He dropped Noah at school at 8:15, same as every day. He watched his son run up the steps, backpack bouncing, and he didn't pull away from the curb until the boy had disappeared through the doors. He never pulled away before then. It was a small superstition, a father's small ritual. You watched them all the way in, and nothing bad could happen. His phone rang before he made it to the corner. "Denise," he said. "Don't Denise me like you already know why I'm calling. I already know why you're calling." His sister sighed on the other end of the line, that long familiar sigh that had been aimed at him since they were kids. Denise was 2 years older and had spent all 41 of those years convinced that Jordan needed managing. "Tonight," she said. "The Hartwell Foundation thing, the charity event. You said you'd think about it." "I thought about it. I'm not going." "Jordan." "Denise, you have been saying no to everything for 3 years. I've been raising a son for 3 years. You can do both." Her voice dropped, softened the way it did when she stopped fighting him and started reaching him. "Jordan, listen to me. Rachel's been gone 3 years and I loved her. You know I loved her, but she would take one look at how you're living right now and she would be furious with you." Jordan sat at a red light and didn't answer. "She wouldn't want this," Denise pressed. This shrinking. You used to fill up a room, little brother. Now you disappear into one. Noah is watching you do it, by the way. You know that kids learn how to be alive from watching us." "What's he learning?" Jordan's jaw tightened. His sister had always known exactly where the soft spots were. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "No, it's not. But it's true, and I'm the only one left who'll say true things to your face." The light turned green. Jordan didn't move until the car behind him tapped its horn. "It's one night," Denise said. "I already got you on the list. It's networking. There'll be developers there, real estate people, foundations that fund community projects, the kind of work you actually care about. You go, you shake some hands, you remember you have a name and a talent, and you come home. That's it. I'll take Noah. He and my two will build a fort and destroy my living room and be asleep by 9. Denise! Wear the charcoal suit, not the black one. The black one makes you look like you're going to a funeral, and God knows you've been to enough of those." She hung up before he could say no again. Jordan sat in his car for a long moment. Then he set the phone down on the passenger seat, the empty passenger seat, and drove home. And he did not decide to go. He just somehow, by evening, found himself putting on the charcoal suit. The Hartwell Foundation's annual gala was held in a hotel ballroom downtown, the kind of place with a lobby the size of a church and a chandelier that probably cost more than Jordan's house. He knew he didn't belong the second he walked in. It wasn't the suit. Denise had been right. The charcoal was fine. It was everything else. The way people moved, the easy way they laughed like laughter was cheap where they came from. The way they touched each other's arms and leaned in and traded names and numbers like currency. Jordan stood near the wall with a glass of water and watched all of it, and he felt like a man who'd wandered into a party in another country. "You look like you're planning your escape route." Jordan turned. An older gentleman stood beside him, silver-haired, holding a scotch with the kind of lined and easy face that told you he'd made his peace with the world a long time ago. "Is it that obvious?" Jordan said. "Son, I've been coming to these things for 30 years. I can spot the ones who'd rather be home in about 4 seconds. The man extended a hand. "Walter Boyd." "Jordan Mitchell." "Mitchell." Walter squinted. "The architect, the one who did the Renner Tower a few years back." Jordan was genuinely surprised. "That was a long time ago." "Good work outlasts the man who did it. That's the whole point of building things." Walter sipped his scotch. "Haven't seen your name on anything lately. You retire. You're too young to retire." I stepped back. Family. Walter studied him for a moment, and there was something kind in the look. Something that had seen its own share of loss. "Family," he repeated. "That's the only good reason there is." He didn't ask a single follow-up question, and Jordan was grateful for it. Some men understood that a short answer was a locked door, and you didn't rattle the handle. "Well," Walter said, nodding across the room, "since you're clearly not going to work this crowd yourself, let me at least point you at the one person here worth meeting. See her over by the windows." Jordan looked, and there she was, Victoria Hartwell. He didn't need to be told who she was. Even a man who'd stepped back from the world knew that face. It had been on the cover of every business magazine in the country. Victoria Hartwell, the woman who had taken a mid-size real estate firm and turned it into an empire, who built neighborhoods and skylines, who could move markets with a phone call. She was 40-something and looked like she'd been carved out of the same marble as the lobby floor. Beautiful, yes, but in a way that seemed designed to keep you at a distance. Every hair in place, every word measured, and around her a small crowd, circling, leaning, reaching. "Watch," Walter said quietly. "Watch how they do it." Jordan watched. A man in an expensive suit leaned in close and said something, and Victoria smiled. The smile you learn in boardrooms, the one that touches the mouth and nowhere else. Another man laughed too loud at something she said. A woman pressed a business card into her hand and held on a beat too long. Everyone wanted their moment. Everyone was trying to be the one she remembered, and Victoria stood in the middle of it all like a lighthouse in a storm, the center of everyone's attention, and completely unmistakably alone. Jordan knew that look. He'd seen it in the mirror. "They don't see her," he said before he'd decided to say anything. Walter turned. "How's that? All of them. Look at them." Jordan nodded toward the crowd. "Not one of them is looking at her. They're looking at what she can do for them. That's a lonely thing to stand in the middle of." Walter was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know, in 30 years, I don't think I've heard anybody at one of these parties say that." He looked at Jordan differently now. "Come on, I'll introduce you." "That's not necessary." "It absolutely is." Walter was already walking. "A man says something true at a party like this. The least I can do is walk him over to the one person who'll appreciate it." Later, Jordan would try to remember exactly how it happened, the order of things, and he never quite could. It went fast the way important moments do. Walter cut through the crowd like a man who'd earned the right, and the circle around Victoria parted. And suddenly Jordan was standing in front of her, and Walter was saying, "Victoria, forgive the interruption. I want you to meet someone. Jordan Mitchell, the architect. Did the Renner Tower, one of the finest buildings in this city, and I've watched them all go up." Victoria Hartwell turned her attention to Jordan, and it was like a light being aimed at him. Up close, she was even more composed, even more untouchable. Her eyes did a quick practiced thing, a top-to-bottom read that he understood immediately. She was pricing him. It wasn't cruel. It was reflex. She'd done it 10,000 times tonight to 10,000 people who wanted something. The suit, the watch, the shoes. She was calculating what he'd come to ask for, because everyone came to ask for something. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, and offered her hand. "It's a pleasure." It was not a pleasure. It was a script. Jordan could hear the script in every syllable, and that was the moment. That was the exact moment the whole night turned. Because Jordan was tired. Not tired of the party. Tired in a deeper way. Tired the way a man gets after 3 years of being told what he should want. 3 years of people looking at him and seeing a widower, a project, a problem to be solved. And he looked at this woman getting the exact same treatment from the other side. Everyone seeing the money, no one seeing the person. And something in him, some worn-down, honest part of him, just decided it wasn't going to play the game. He shook her hand, and he said, "I have to be honest with you, Ms. Hartwell. I don't have anything to pitch you." Victoria's practiced smile flickered, just slightly. "I'm sorry. I don't have a project. I'm not raising money. I'm not looking for an investor or an introduction or a favor." Jordan let go of her hand. "My sister put me on the list. I came because she was worried about me. That's the whole reason I'm here. So whatever it is you're bracing for, you can stop bracing. I'm not going to ask you for anything." The little crowd around them had gone quiet. The man who'd leaned in too close, the woman with the business card, all of them had stopped sensing something off script the way a herd senses weather. Victoria's eyes had changed. The pricing look was gone. Now she was looking at him the way you look at a word you don't recognize. "That's," she said slowly, "an unusual thing to open with." "Probably. I'm out of practice." Jordan glanced around at the crowd, at the reaching hands and the leaning bodies, and then back at her. "Can I say something? And you can walk away after no hard feelings." Something in Victoria's expression said she should absolutely walk away. She didn't. "Say it," she said. Jordan took a breath. "I've been standing over there for the last 20 minutes, watching people come at you like you're a door they're trying to get through. And I kept thinking, I bet nobody in this room has looked her in the eye and talked to her like a person all night. I bet everybody who's shaken your hand tonight wanted something on the other side of it." He shook his head. "I know what that's like. Different reasons. But I know what it's like to have a whole room full of people looking at you and not one of them actually seeing you. It's the loneliest feeling there is. And I'd hate to be one more person who added to it." For a moment, nobody said anything at all. And then a man near the front of the little crowd, younger, sharp suit, the kind of man who measured the room by who was worth talking to, let out a short laugh. "That's a hell of an angle," the man said. "I don't want anything from you. Never heard that one before." He looked at the others like they were all in on it. "Come on. Nobody talks to Victoria Hartwell without wanting something. Everybody wants a piece. The only question is how big a piece." He smirked at Jordan. "So which is it, friend? You want a job? An investment? You want her to fund your little community project, whatever it is? Just say it. All this humble architect stuff, it's a good act. I'll give you that." The words hung in the air. Jordan felt the old anger stir. He'd spent 3 years having people decide who he was before they knew him. He knew this man. He'd known 100 of him. And in another life, a younger life, he might have swung back hard. But he was too old for that now, and too tired. And standing there, he realized he didn't actually need this man to believe him. So instead, Jordan reached over, picked up the glass of water he'd carried around all night, and set it down on the nearest table. He set it down hard enough that the ice cracked, hard enough that the sound cut across the quiet, hard enough that every head, still not turned toward him, turned now. He looked at Victoria Hartwell. And he said it. "Your money doesn't impress me at all." The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that has weight that you can feel on your skin. A waiter stopped mid-step. Conversations at the neighboring tables died. Somewhere behind him, near the back, a champagne flute slipped out of someone's fingers and shattered on the marble, and nobody even flinched, because everyone was staring at the widowed single father who had just told the richest woman in America that her fortune meant nothing to him. The man in the sharp suit's smirk froze halfway off his face. Victoria Hartwell went completely still. Jordan wasn't finished. "I mean it," he said, and his voice was quiet. Now quiet enough that people leaned in to hear it, which is the strangest kind of power there is. The whole room bending toward a man who wasn't raising his voice. "I've spent my whole life around people who measure everything by what it costs. Buildings, cars, watches, each other. I did it too for a long time. And then I lost the one person in my life who never once measured me that way. And I found out real quick that all of it, all the money, all the titles, all the things people spend their whole lives chasing, none of it is worth a single ordinary Tuesday with somebody who actually knows you." He held Victoria's gaze. "So no, your money doesn't impress me. I've seen what money can't fix. I've buried what money couldn't save. Your bank account is the least interesting thing about you, and I'd bet everything I've got that you already know that, and that you've been waiting a long time for somebody to walk into a room like this and say it out loud." You could have heard the pin drop. The man in the sharp suit found his voice first, and it came out thinner than before. "You can't talk to her like, 'It's all right, Marcus.'" Victoria said it without looking at him. Her eyes hadn't left Jordan's face. "It's all right." Marcus shut his mouth. And then something happened that no one in that room had expected, least of all Jordan. Victoria Hartwell smiled, not the boardroom smile, not the one that touched the mouth and nowhere else. A real one. Small and startled and real. The smile of a person who has just been handed something they didn't know they were desperate for. Her composure, the marble, the untouchable distance for 1 second, it cracked right down the middle, and behind it was just a woman. Tired, lonely, and for the first time in longer than she could remember seeing. "You know," she said, and her voice was different, now lower, human. "I have shaken maybe 200 hands tonight, and every single person attached to those hands wanted something from me. A donation, a meeting, a photograph, a piece." Her eyes flicked just barely to Marcus and then back. "You're the first one who walked up and told me my money is boring." "I said it was the least interesting thing about you," Jordan corrected. "Not that it was boring, those are different." The smile widened. "Are they?" "Completely." Victoria studied him for a long, long moment. The crowd around them was starting to remember how to breathe, starting to whisper, and Jordan could feel the temperature of the room turning against him, could feel the judgment gathering, the who. Does he think he is? The "did you hear what he said to her?" Because that's what rooms like this do to a man who breaks the rules. But Victoria Hartwell wasn't looking at the room. She was looking at him. "Walter," she said without turning her head. "Thank you for the introduction, truly. It may be the only interesting thing that's happened to me in months." Then to Jordan, "Would you walk with me just to that terrace there? I find I'd like to hear more from a man who came to a fundraiser with nothing to raise." And here is the thing Jordan Mitchell understood in that instant, standing in the middle of 300 people, who had all just decided he was either a fool or a con artist. He'd meant every word. He hadn't said it to charm her. He hadn't said it as an angle the way Marcus thought. He'd said it because it was true, and because he was a man who had learned the hardest possible way that true things were the only things worth saying anymore. He'd said it to a stranger the same way he answered his son's impossible questions, plainly, honestly, without dressing it up. And that, exactly, that was the reason it had landed the way nothing else in that ballroom had landed all night. "Mr. Mitchell," Victoria said. "The terrace." Jordan glanced across the room and found Walter, who lifted his scotch a half-inch in a small private salute. "Go on, son," and beside him, Marcus, red-faced, looking like a man who had just watched a game he was sure he'd already won slip completely out of his hands. Jordan looked back at Victoria Hartwell. The billionaire the whole country wanted a piece of. The woman standing in the middle of everything and holding apparently nothing. "I have to be home by 10, he said. "I've got a son. He's 8. He waits up." Something moved across Victoria's face when he said it, something soft, something that looked almost like hunger, though not for anything money could buy. "Then we'd better not waste time," she said, and she turned and walked toward the terrace, and after a moment Jordan Mitchell, the widower, the single father, the man, the whole room had already written off, set down the last of his broken iced water, straightened his charcoal suit, and followed her. Behind him, the whispers rose like a tide. "Did you hear what he said to her?" "Who is he?" Nobody talks to Victoria Hartwell like that. And it was true. Nobody did. That was exactly why it worked. What none of them knew, what Victoria herself didn't yet know, what even Jordan didn't fully understand as he crossed that ballroom floor, was that the 7 words he'd just spoken weren't the end of anything. They weren't a scandal or an insult or a con. They were a door opening. For a man who had spent 3 years refusing to walk through any door at all, and on the other side of it, in the cool air of that terrace, away from the reaching hands and the leaning bodies and the whole hungry, glittering room, 2 people who had each learned to survive by making themselves smaller were about to sit down across from each other and for the first time in years take up exactly as much space as they were. Jordan stopped at the terrace doors. He thought of Rachel the way he always did at the edge of anything new. He thought of Noah, waiting up 8 years old and treating every promise like a contract. He thought of Denise, who had bullied him into a suit and out of a house, and he thought surprising himself maybe. Just maybe. It was the first hopeful word that had crossed his mind in 3 years. He stepped out onto the terrace, and the ballroom doors swung shut behind him, and the noise of all those people who would never understand him faded to nothing. The terrace was colder than Jordan expected, and quieter, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. Victoria walked to the stone railing and put both hands on it and looked out at the city lights the way people do when they don't quite know what to say and are pretending to admire a view. Jordan stayed a few feet back. He'd said his piece inside. Out here, he had nothing prepared. "You embarrassed him," Victoria said finally, not turning around. "Marcus. Marcus." She said the name like it tasted of something. "He runs my acquisitions division. He's very good at his job and completely insufferable, and I've never once seen him lose an argument until about 90 seconds ago." She turned around, now leaned back against the railing, arms folded. "He's going to hate you for the rest of his life, you understand. Men like Marcus don't forgive being made small in front of a crowd." "I didn't make him small." "You made him small." "He made himself small," Jordan said. "I just didn't stop him." Victoria almost smiled again. She caught it and stopped it, and Jordan noticed both the almost and the stopping. She was a woman who guarded her own face the way a bank guards a vault. "So," she said, "Jordan Mitchell, the architect who came with nothing to sell." She tilted her head. "You want me to believe you walked into a room full of the most powerful people in this city, and the only thing on your mind was your sister's peace of mind. I don't need you to believe anything, it's just true." "Nothing is just true, Mr. Mitchell. Not in my world. Everything is a position." She studied him. "So let me ask you plainly, since you seem to like plain. What do you want? To be home by 10. After that?" "I don't understand the question." "Yes, you do." Her voice sharpened, and Jordan realized this was the real Victoria Hartwell, not the marble in the magazine photos, but this, a mind that had been lied to by experts for 20 years, and had learned to test everyone the way you tap ice before you walk on it. "Every person who has ever been kind to me wanted something eventually. Every single one. So I've stopped waiting for the ask. I just get to it faster now. It saves everyone time. So what do you want?" "Jordan, a donation for your community. Work a contract. My number. Tell me now, while I still find you interesting, because in about 4 minutes, I'm going to have to go back in there and shake 200 more hands, and I'd rather know what I'm dealing with." Jordan looked at her for a long moment. "You know what's sad about that?" he said quietly. "It's not that you think everyone wants something. It's that you're probably right, and you've made your peace with it. You've decided that's just how people are, and that's a lonely thing to decide." "Don't," Victoria said, and there was a warning in it. "Don't what?" "Don't do the thing where you diagnose me. I've had therapists. I've had 3 ex-boyfriends who fancied themselves therapists. I don't need an architect." "I'm not diagnosing you." Jordan took a step toward the railing, not toward her, just enough to lean on it beside her, both of them looking out at the city now, instead of at each other, which was easier. "I'm telling you I recognize it. That's different." "Recognize what?" "The tired." Jordan said it simply. "You've got the tired. I've got it too. It's the kind you can't sleep off. It comes from carrying something heavy for a long time and never getting to put it down, because the second you put it down, everybody sees how heavy it was, and you can't have that. So you keep carrying it, and you keep smiling, and you tell everybody you're fine." He shrugged. "I recognize the tired, that's all. I'm not trying to fix it. I don't think it fixes." Victoria didn't answer for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its edge. "What are you carrying?" "You first." "That's not how this works. I'm the one who asks the questions." "Says who?" "Says everyone. For about 20 years. "Well," Jordan said, "I'm not everyone. You said so yourself inside." He glanced at her. "You first." And Victoria Hartwell, who had not told a stranger a true thing about herself in longer than she could remember, who had built a fortress out of press releases and boardroom smiles, precisely so that no one could ever get close enough to hurt her again. Looked at this widowed architect who'd cracked the ice in his water glass and told her the truth in front of 300 people, and she decided against every instinct she owned to answer. "His name was David," she said. Jordan waited. "We were engaged. This was 6 years ago now. 6 years." She shook her head slowly, like she couldn't believe the number. "He wasn't in the business. That's what I loved about him. He was a high school history teacher. Can you imagine me and a history teacher? My board thought I'd lost my mind. My mother thought he was after money." A short, bitter laugh. "He wasn't. He used to get annoyed when I paid for things. It became a whole argument between us. This grown man insisting on covering dinner at places where dinner cost more than his monthly rent, because he said if he ever let me pay for everything, he'd stop feeling like a man and start feeling like an employee." She stared out at the lights. "I have never in my life been loved like that, before or since. Somebody who wanted to give me things instead of get things from me." What happened? 3 weeks before the wedding, he had a headache. She said it flatly, the way people say the thing they've had to say too many times, sanded smooth by repetition, so it can't cut them anymore. "Just a headache." He took something for it and went to bed. Aneurysm. He never woke up. He was 34. She turned her head and looked at Jordan directly. "So, that's what I'm carrying. 6 years of it. Everyone thinks I threw myself into work because I love the work. I don't love the work. I bury myself in it because when I'm working, I'm not thinking about the fact that I bought a wedding dress I never wore, and I still can't make myself give it away." The city hummed below them. "I'm sorry," Jordan said. And he didn't say it the way people usually said it, the reflexive way, the way that's really just a request to change the subject. He said it like a man who knew exactly what those 2 words were worth, which was almost nothing, and said them anyway, because sometimes almost nothing is all there is. "Your turn," Victoria said. Jordan nodded. A deal was a deal. Noah had taught him that, or maybe reminded him of it. Her name was Rachel. Was 3 years ago. Jordan turned his own words over, surprised at how hard they still were to lift even now, even for a stranger. "She was a teacher too. Elementary school. Isn't that something your history teacher and my elementary teacher? Maybe people like us just recognize the ones who build the soft things." He half smiled at the private thought, then let it go. "She got sick in the fall. We had a name for it by winter that I still don't like saying out loud. And by spring she was gone. Our son was 5. "Noah," Victoria said. Jordan looked at her surprised. "You said his name inside. Before all the you told the whole room you had a son who waits up. I remembered." "Yeah." Jordan's throat worked. "Noah. He's 8 now. He was 5 when it happened. And here's the thing nobody tells you about a 5-year-old losing his mother, he didn't understand it. Not really. For about a year he kept asking when she was coming back, every few weeks. Is Mom coming back for my birthday? Is Mom coming back for Christmas? And I had to look him in the eye and tell him no every single time, and watch him figure it out a little more each time, one no at a time." He stopped. His hands had tightened on the railing. "You want to know what I'm carrying that? 3 years of no's. That's what I'm carrying." Victoria was quiet. "I stepped back from everything," Jordan went on, because now that the door was open, the words wanted out. "My career, the big projects, all of it. People thought I was crazy. My old firm called me with things that would have Renner Tower was nothing compared to what they offered me after. And I said no. Because it was 11 months in another state, and my kid had already lost one parent, and I decided that no building in the world was worth him losing the other one to a plane ticket." He shook his head. "Everybody told me I was throwing my life away. And maybe I was. But I'll tell you what, every night at 8:15, I watch that boy walk into his school, and I don't drive away until the doors close behind him, and in 3 years, I haven't missed one. Not one. And that's worth more to me than any skyline." He stopped a little embarrassed by how much he'd said. Victoria was looking at him with an expression he couldn't name. It wasn't pity. He'd have hated pity. It was something closer to recognition, the exact thing he'd claimed inside to recognize in her. "That's the difference between us," she said softly. "What is? You stepped back for someone. When your world ended, you had a reason to stay soft. A person. A little person who needed you to keep being human." She looked back out at the city, and her jaw tightened. "When mine ended, I had a company. And a company doesn't need you to be human. A company needs you to be right and hard and never wrong in front of the shareholders. So I got hard. And you stayed soft. And here we both are 6 years and 3 years later, standing on a balcony being tired at each other." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "God, listen to us." "It's a good balcony," Jordan offered. And Victoria Hartwell laughed. Really laughed, a startled, unguarded sound that seemed to surprise her more than it surprised him. A laugh that came from somewhere the boardroom smile had never reached. She put a hand to her mouth like she could catch it and put it back. But it was already out, already in the cold air between them, and Jordan thought it might have been the best sound he'd heard in 3 years. "You have to go," she said, when the laugh had faded. "It's almost 10. Jordan checked his watch. She was right. "How did you?" "You keep looking at it, every couple of minutes. You've been counting down since we walked out here." She said it without accusation. "Go home to your son, Jordan." He nodded. He straightened up off the railing. And then, because he was still the man who'd cracked the ice in his glass, he said the honest thing instead of the smooth thing. "I'd like to talk to you again. Not about anything. Not a project, not a favor. I haven't talked to another adult like this in 3 years. And I forgot how much I missed it. That's all." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into a small clutch, took out a card, and Jordan watched her do it. Took a pen and crossed out the printed number on the front. She wrote a different one on the back. She handed it to him. "That's my actual phone," she said. "Not the one my assistant answers. There are maybe 5 people alive who have that number, and 2 of them are my lawyers." She held his eyes. "Don't make me regret it, architect." "I won't. Everyone says that." "I'm not everyone," Jordan said again. And this time she did smile, the real one, and she didn't try to catch it and put it back. He made it home by 9:58. Denise was on the couch with her feet up, and the sound of 3 sleeping children came faintly from the back of the house, Noah and her 2 worn out from whatever fort-based war they'd waged. She looked at her brother's face for exactly 1 second and then sat straight up. "What happened?" she said. "Something happened. You've got to look." "Nothing happened. Jordan Mitchell, I have known you since before you had teeth. Something happened. I talked to somebody, that's all." "A woman." "Denise, it's a woman. Look at your face. Oh my God, it's a woman." Denise was up off the couch now, delighted hunting. "Who's somebody from the event? Somebody in the business? Give me a name." Jordan set his keys down and loosened his tie and considered lying, and then remembered he'd spent the whole night telling the truth, and it had gone better than anything had gone in years. "Victoria Hartwell," he said. His sister's mouth actually fell open. She pointed at nothing, at the air, at the general direction of wealth. "The Victoria Hartwell. The one whose foundation the one on the magazines. That Victoria Hartwell. That one." "Jordan." Denise's voice dropped into something between awe and warning. "What did you say to her?" "I told her her money didn't impress me." The silence stretched. "You did what?" "In front of about 300 people. There was a whole thing. A man dropped a glass." Jordan sat down heavily on the couch, and for the first time all night, he let himself feel how strange the evening had been, how far outside his own life he'd walked. "And then she took me out to a balcony, and we talked for 45 minutes about the people we buried." Denise sat back down next to him slowly, and for once in her life she didn't have a comeback ready. "Jordan," she said finally gently, "be careful. It's not like that. It's not, we just talked." "I know. I believe you. But be careful anyway. She put her hand on his arm. Not because of her. Because of you. You've kept that door shut for 3 years, and you shut it for a good reason, and I'm the one who pushed you out that door tonight, so I feel responsible. She squeezed. Just go slow, that's all, for Noah's sake and for yours. Jordan nodded. He was going to say something reassuring. But down the hall, a small voice called out, thin with sleep. Dad? And Jordan was up and moving before he'd even registered it, the way he always was, the way he'd been for 3 years. Noah was sitting up in the guest bed, hair wild, eyes half closed. You're home. I'm home, buddy. Did you have to shake a lot of hands? Jordan sat on the edge of the bed and smiled. So many hands. You have no idea. Was it boring? Jordan thought about the crack of ice, the fallen champagne flute, the woman laughing on the balcony. It started boring, he said. It got interesting. Good. Noah was already lying back down, already sinking. I saved you a fort. It's in Aunt Denise's living room. Don't let her knock it down. I would never. Promise? Promise. And Noah, satisfied that a contract had been signed, was asleep again before Jordan finished tucking the blanket up under his chin. Jordan sat there a moment longer than he needed to. He thought about the card in his jacket pocket, the number crossed out on the front and rewritten on the back. 5 people alive have this number. He thought about Rachel. He thought about the guilt that was already faintly beginning to gather at the edges of the good feeling, because how dare he feel good? How dare he laugh on a balcony when Rachel was? He stood up. He was too old and too tired to argue with that particular ghost tonight. He'd argue with it tomorrow. He always did. He did not call Victoria the next day, or the day after. He almost did both days. He took the card out and looked at it and put it back. He told himself he was busy, and he was there, was school, and a small renovation job across town, and Noah had a loose tooth that was consuming the boy's entire life. But the truth, and Jordan was a man who'd sworn off anything but the truth, was that he was afraid. Afraid of what it meant. Afraid of what Rachel would think. Afraid most of all of hoping for something and watching it die again, because he'd done that once and barely survived it, and a man only has so many survivals in him. It was Victoria who broke first. His phone buzzed on the 3rd evening, an unknown number, and Jordan almost let it go to voicemail. He answered on the last ring. You didn't call, Victoria said without hello. Jordan actually smiled. Ms. Hartwell, 5 people have that number, architect, and I gave it to a 6th and the 6th didn't call. I run a company on the principle that when I extend something, people take it. You've thrown off my entire understanding of the universe. I've been busy. My son's got a loose tooth. It's a whole situation. A loose tooth. It's front and center, bottom row. He won't stop wiggling it. He's convinced it's going to fall out during dinner, and he's going to swallow it and choke, and I've explained the odds of that maybe 40 times. There was a pause on the line, and then Victoria Hartwell said in a voice that had gone strangely soft, You have no idea how much I needed to hear about a loose tooth. What? I've spent all 3 of these days in a conference room with 14 lawyers over a deal that is falling apart in slow motion, and every single sentence spoken to me has been about leverage and exposure and downside risk, and I just a loose tooth. A breath. Tell me more about the tooth. So Jordan, standing in his kitchen, told the richest woman in America about his son's loose tooth in more detail than the subject strictly deserved, and Victoria listened like it was the most interesting acquisition she'd ever considered. And somewhere in the middle of it, Jordan realized he was leaning against his counter, relaxed, laughing, and he hadn't thought about being afraid in 10 whole minutes. They talked for an hour. Then they talked again 2 nights later. And again after that. It became a thing that happened unplanned, unscheduled, which for a woman whose life was scheduled in 6-minute increments was apparently a small miracle. She'd call after Noah was asleep. Jordan would sit on his back step in the dark, and she'd tell him about the deal that was dying, and he'd tell her about the renovation and the tooth and the eternal war over vegetables. And neither of them once mentioned money or contracts, or the fortune sitting between them like a piece of furniture they'd both agreed to ignore. Why does he wait up? Victoria asked one night 3 weeks in. What? Noah, you said the first night he waits up for you. Every night. Why, most kids would be thrilled to have the house to themselves. Jordan was quiet for a moment on his back step, because for about a year after Rachel died, he said, I'd put him to bed, and he'd wake up in the morning and I'd be there, and that was fine. But then, one night, I had to run out nothing big. He was with a sitter. I was gone an hour, and when I got back he was awake and he'd been crying, and he wouldn't tell me why, and it took me 2 days to get it out of him. Jordan's voice thickened. Turns out he'd worked out in that little head that Mom went to sleep one day and didn't wake up. And so he decided, 5 years old, he decided this all by himself, that if he stayed awake until I got home and made sure I was still here, then I couldn't do the same thing. He was standing guard over me, so I wouldn't disappear too. The line was silent. So now he waits up, Jordan finished, and I let him. Because I'd rather he lose a little sleep than lie in the dark, being scared his last parent isn't coming back. He'll grow out of it. The therapist says he'll grow out of it. But until he does, I make sure I'm home, and I make sure he sees me, and then he can sleep. He heard something on the line then that he'd never heard from Victoria Hartwell. He heard her crying, quietly, trying to hide it. Victoria, I'm fine. You're not fine. I'm the CEO of a 9-figure real estate company, and I am absolutely fine. Don't. Her voice broke clean in half, and she stopped fighting it. God, that little boy, standing guard over his father so his father won't die in his sleep. And here I am, 46 years old, everything anyone could ever want. And there is not one single person on this earth who would stay awake to make sure I came home. Not one Jordan. If I disappeared tonight, my board would have a statement out by morning and a successor by Friday, and that would be the whole of it. That's not true. It's completely true, and you know it's true. That's why you can't tell me who'd miss me. You're just being kind. I'd miss you. The words were out before Jordan had decided to say them. They surprised him as much as her. But he was a man who'd sworn off lies, and it was true, so he let it stand. The line went very quiet. You barely know me, Victoria said finally, and her voice was small. I know you buried a history teacher who wouldn't let you pay for dinner. I know you can't give away a dress. I know you laughed on a balcony 3 weeks ago like you'd forgotten how. And I know exactly how that feels, because I forgot too, and I'm just now remembering. Jordan looked up at the dark sky over his little backyard. I know enough. And I'm telling you, Victoria, if you disappeared tonight, I would miss you. That's not kindness. That's just a fact. You keep saying nobody in your world means anything they say. Okay. I'm not in your world. And I mean it. He heard her breathing on the line. Just breathing. I have to go, she said thick. There's a thing in the morning. Okay. But Jordan. Yeah. Thank you. For the tooth. And for all of it. For talking to me like you're a person. Yes. A watery laugh. Like I'm a person. Good night, architect. Good night, Victoria. She hung up. And Jordan sat on his back step in the dark for a long time, holding the quiet phone, feeling the guilt and the hope wrestle in his chest, the way they'd been wrestling for 3 weeks, and for the first time, just barely hope had its shoulders pinned. It couldn't last, of course. Things like that never got to stay simple. Jordan should have known. The first crack came from a direction he didn't expect. It was a Saturday. He'd taken Noah to the park, and they were on the way home. Noah narrating the entire plot of a movie he'd seen exactly one time, and gotten mostly wrong when Jordan's phone rang. Victoria. He almost didn't answer with Noah in the car, but something in him said answer, and he did. Are you sitting down? Victoria said. I'm driving. Pull over. Jordan's stomach dropped. He pulled into a gas station lot. What's wrong? Someone talked. Her voice was flat and controlled, which he'd learned meant she was furious. Someone from the gala, weeks ago now, about what you said to me, about us going out to the terrace. It's Jordan. It's in one of the business gossip columns this morning, with your name, your full name, your late wife's name, The fact that you're a widower with a son. They dug. Somebody sat down and dug into your entire life. Jordan gripped the wheel. In the back seat, Noah had gone quiet, sensing the change in his father the way kids do. "What does it say?" Jordan asked, very low. Victoria hesitated. "You don't want—" "Read it to me." She read it to him. It was worse than he'd braced for. It framed him as an opportunist, a struggling single father who'd charmed his way to a lonely billionaire with a sob story and a slick line about not caring for money. "The oldest trick there is," the column said, "tell a rich woman you don't want her fortune and watch her hand it to you." It mentioned that his architecture career had stalled. It used the word convenient. It speculated in the ugly way those things do about how much of the widower's grief was real and how much was staging. By the time she finished, Jordan's hands were white on the wheel. "Jordan," Victoria said, "say something." He couldn't. Not with Noah in the back seat. Not with his son's eyes on him in the rearview mirror, wide and worried. "Dad," Noah said, "are you okay? Your face is doing the mad thing." Jordan made himself breathe. He made himself unclench his hands one finger at a time. "I'm okay, buddy," he said, and it cost him everything to keep his voice level. "It's just work stuff, grown-up work stuff. It's boring." He met his son's eyes in the mirror and smiled, and it was the hardest smile of his life. "You want to finish telling me about the movie? I think you were at the part with the dragon." "There wasn't a dragon." "There should have been." Noah mercifully took the bait and launched back into his mangled plot. And Jordan pulled the phone back to his ear and said very quietly so his son wouldn't hear, "Victoria, I have my kid in the car. I can't do this right now." "I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. They put Rachel's name in there." His voice shook just once and he clamped down on it. "They put my dead wife's name in a gossip column to make me look like a con man. They took the worst thing that ever happened to me and used it as a prop." "Jordan, I have to drive my son home now," Jordan said. "I'll call you tonight." He hung up before she could answer. He put the phone face down on the seat, and he drove his son home through streets that had somehow in the space of one phone call become a place where strangers were writing lies about his grief for money, and he did it while nodding along to a garbled movie plot and saying, "No way," and then what happened, in all the right places because that was the job. That was the whole job. You carried the heavy thing, and you smiled, and you made sure the little person in the back seat never felt the weight of it. Noah fell asleep against the window before they got home. Jordan carried him inside, laid him on the couch, pulled a blanket over him. He stood there and watched his son sleep for a while, the way you do, the way he'd been doing every 8:15 for 3 years. Then he went into the kitchen, and he took out his phone, and he looked at the last thing on the screen, and he thought about the word convenient. And he thought about the man Marcus with the smirk that had frozen halfway off his face, and he wondered for the first time since the balcony whether he'd made a terrible mistake letting himself hope at all. His phone buzzed. A text. "Victoria, I am going to fix this. I don't care what it costs or who I have to burn. Nobody drags your wife's name through the mud on my account. Nobody." V. Jordan read it twice, and he understood reading it that whatever this was between them had just stopped being a series of quiet phone calls on a back step in the dark. It had walked out into the daylight in front of everyone, and the world had taken one look at a widowed black single father standing next to a billionaire white woman, and it had already, without knowing a single true thing about either of them, decided exactly what it wanted the story to be. He set the phone down. Down the hall, Noah stirred in his sleep and murmured something and went still again. And Jordan Mitchell stood alone in his small kitchen with the coffee that was always too weak and the toaster that was still broken, and he made himself a promise, the kind of promise he'd taught his son to treat like a contract. They could write whatever they wanted about him, but they were not going to make him afraid to hope again. Not after he'd come this far. Not after 3 years. He'd survived worse than a gossip column. He'd survived the thing the gossip column was cruel enough to joke about. He called her that night after Noah was finally asleep, and the first thing he said was, "Don't fix it." There was a pause on the line. Excuse me. Don't fix it. Whatever you're planning, the lawyers, the burning it all down, whatever's in that text, don't. Jordan sat on his back step in the dark, the way he did now, the way that had become their place without either of them naming it. If you go to war over this, you know what happens. It becomes a bigger story. Right now it's one ugly column that people will forget by Wednesday. But Victoria Hartwell threatening lawsuits, calling in favors, leaning on an editor, that's a story that runs for a month. That's the story where they say, look, she's protecting him. She must really be in deep. Isn't it convenient? He said the word like it was a splinter. You'd be handing them exactly what they wrote about. So I'm supposed to just let them? Yes. Jordan, they used your wife's name. I know what they used. His voice was quiet and hard. I've been thinking about nothing else for 8 hours. But here's what I know, Victoria. Rachel's name isn't in that column. Not really. A woman I loved for 11 years who taught second grade and couldn't parallel park and cried at dog commercials, she's not in that column. Some letters that spell her name are in that column, arranged by a stranger who never met her to sell clicks. Those aren't the same thing. They don't get to touch the real her. Only I get to touch the real her. And Noah. He breathed. So no. You don't burn down a magazine over some letters. You let it die on its own because that's what those things do when you starve them. The line was quiet for a long moment. When did you get so wise? Victoria said finally, and there was something raw under the lightness. I'm not wise. I've just done grief for 3 years, and I've learned what's worth fighting and what isn't. Jordan looked up at the dark. Fighting a gossip column isn't worth it. You know what is. Whether you and I let a stranger with a keyboard decide what this is before we've even decided it ourselves. And what is this? Victoria asked, softly. You and I. What is it, Jordan? Because I've been asking myself that for 3 weeks, and every time I get close to an answer, some part of me, the part that's been running a company for 20 years, tells me I'm being a fool. That people like me don't get this. That I had my one shot at it and I buried him. Jordan was quiet. I don't know what it is, he admitted. I know I sit on this step every night hoping the phone's going to buzz. I know I told my sister about you, and she told me to be careful, and I've been careful, and it hasn't made a bit of difference. Victoria, I still hope. And I'd forgotten how. I genuinely forgot a person could feel that, and you reminded me. And I don't know if that terrifies me or saves me, and most nights, it's honestly both. He rubbed his face. So I don't know what it is. But I know I don't want a magazine to name it for us. And I know I'm not ready to stop finding out. Neither am I, she said, barely above a whisper. Okay then. Okay then, she echoed. And they let the column die. And it died the way he said it would, starved of the oxygen of a reaction. By the following week, there was a fresh scandal about somebody else, and the internet, which has the memory of a goldfish, and the mercy of none, moved on. But something had changed. The column had dragged what was private out into the open, and now that it was in the open, it couldn't go back. People knew. Victoria's world knew. And her world, Jordan would learn, did not let a thing like this go quietly. The invitation came 10 days later. A quarterly investor event, Victoria's company hosting its major backers, the people whose money moved through her empire. She called him about it, and he could hear in her voice that she'd fought with herself before dialing. I want you to come, she said. As my guest. Not hiding on a balcony this time. In the room, with the lights on. Victoria, I know what I'm asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. These are the people who read that column, Jordan. Every one of them read it. And if you come, they'll stare and they'll whisper, and some of them will say things, and I can't promise you it'll be pleasant. A breath. But I'm tired of the balcony. I'm tired of a life where the one real thing in it has to happen in the dark, where nobody can see. If we're then, I want to stand in a room with you and not be ashamed of it. But it's your choice. It's your name they printed. Your wife's name. So, it's your call, and I'll respect whatever you decide. Jordan sat with the phone against his ear. He thought about hiding. He'd gotten good at hiding these 3 years. It was safe in the dark. Nobody wrote columns about a man who stayed home. Then he thought about Noah standing guard over him every night so his last parent wouldn't disappear. He thought about the lesson he was teaching that boy about how to be alive, the lesson Denise had thrown in his face months ago. Kids learn how to be alive from watching us. What's he learning? I'll come, Jordan said. You don't have to. I'll come. But Victoria, I need you to understand something before I walk into that room. His voice was even. I'm not going to perform for them. I'm not going to dress up my grief or explain myself or prove I'm not a con man. If I walk in there, I walk in as exactly who I am, a widower, an architect, a father. And if that's not enough for the richest people in the city, then that's their poverty, not mine. There was a silence on the line, and then Victoria Hartwell said in a voice he'd never heard her use, "That is the most attractive thing anyone has said to me in 6 years." I was being serious. So was I. Denise took Noah. She didn't lecture this time. She just held her brother's face in both hands at the door and said, "You look good. You look like you again. Whatever this is, go be it." And Jordan drove downtown in the charcoal suit, not the black one, and walked into a room full of people who had already decided what he was. He felt it the second he entered. The heads turning. The conversations pausing and resuming a half-beat later lower. He was the only black man in the room who wasn't holding a tray. He knew it, and they knew it, and everyone was too polished to say it, which was almost worse than if they'd just said it. Victoria found him within a minute. She crossed the whole room to do it publicly, deliberately, and she took his arm in front of all of them, and Jordan understood that this was her version of cracking the ice in a water glass. A statement. This one. In front of all of you. This one. You came, she said quiet, just for him. I said I would. I keep my promises. Ask my son. She almost laughed. Then her face changed, and Jordan followed her eyes, and there was Marcus, the acquisitions man, the frozen smirk from the gala, detaching himself from a cluster of investors, and making his way over with the unhurried confidence of a man who has an audience and knows it. Jordan, Victoria said under her breath. I remember him. He's been since the column, he's been the loudest voice in the building saying I've lost my judgment. Be careful. I'm always careful. You cracked a glass at my gala. That was very careful. You should have seen the alternative. Marcus arrived, and the little pod of investors drifted in his wake, sensing theater. He had a glass of wine in one hand and a smile on his face that had nothing warm in it. Mr. Mitchell, Marcus said. The famous Mr. Mitchell. We've all read so much about you. He let that sit, let a couple of the investors exchange glances. Bold of you to come, after everything that's been written. If it were me, I think I'd have stayed home. I'm sure you would, Jordan said pleasantly. A flicker of annoyance crossed Marcus's face. He hadn't expected agreement. You know what the whole room is wondering, don't you? They're all too polite to ask, so allow me to be the rude one since apparently we're all being so honest tonight. He turned slightly, playing to his audience. A struggling single father, a stalled career, and the wealthiest woman in this city who conveniently loses her judgment 3 weeks after you tell her in front of 300 witnesses that you don't care about her money. He smiled. It's a beautiful line, I'll give you that. It's the most effective line I've ever heard. Because the moment a man tells a rich woman he doesn't want her fortune, she can't hand it over fast enough. He sipped his wine. So, let me ask you directly in front of everyone, and let's see how the honesty holds up. You've built a billion-dollar empire, Victoria. Why on earth would you choose a man who has so little? The room went quiet. It was the gala all over again, except worse because this time there was no water glass to hide behind, and no balcony to escape to, and Marcus had asked the one question that everyone in the room was thinking, and now everyone in the room was waiting. Jordan felt the old heat rise, the anger. 3 years of people deciding who he was. A gossip column with his wife's name in it. A smug man in an expensive suit performing cruelty for an audience. He could feel Victoria beside him, could feel her tensing to speak to defend him. And he knew if she did that, Marcus won, because then it looked exactly like the column said, the billionaire protecting her charity case. So Jordan touched her arm, just barely. "I've got this." And then he did the thing he'd done at the gala. He didn't raise his voice. He lowered it. He made the whole room lean in to hear a man who refused to shout. "You're right," Jordan said. Marcus blinked. You're right. Let's be honest. That's what you wanted, isn't it, honesty? So here it is." Jordan set down the glass he was holding gently. This time, no crack, no theater, just a quiet click of glass on wood that somehow silenced the room more completely than breaking it had. "You're right that compared to Victoria, I don't have much. I don't have $1 billion. I don't have a company. I drive a 9-year-old car, and my toaster's been broken since March, and I keep meaning to fix it, and I never do." A few uncertain looks passed through the crowd. This wasn't the defensive squirming they'd come to watch. "You're right about all of it, Marcus. On paper, I have almost nothing." He let that land. "But I want to tell you what I do have, since we're being honest." The room was dead silent now. "I have a son named Noah. He's 8. Jordan's voice was steady and low, and it carried into every corner. 3 years ago, his mother died, and for about a year that little boy stayed awake every single night 5 years old because he'd figured out that his mom went to sleep one day and didn't wake up, and he decided that if he stayed awake until I got home, he could keep me from disappearing too. He stood guard over his own father, so I wouldn't die in the night and leave him alone. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman put her hand to her mouth. "You want to know what I've learned in 3 years of that? I've learned patience. I've learned to answer the same impossible question 40 times without losing my temper. I've learned to smile when I'm breaking so a child doesn't have to carry my weight. I've learned to show up every morning, every night, every 8:15 at the school steps for 3 years without missing one. Not one." He looked around the room unhurried. "I've learned loyalty, sacrifice. What love actually costs when it's not a word on a card, but a thing you do at 2 in the morning when a kid has a nightmare. Those are the things I have, Marcus. And you're right, no bank account can buy a single one of them." Nobody moved. "So you asked why she'd choose a man who has so little?" Jordan turned finally and looked at Victoria, who was standing very still, her eyes bright. "But you've got the whole thing backwards. Victoria doesn't need somebody to save her. She built all this." He gestured at the room, the wealth, the empire. "She doesn't need a man to depend on her money, and God knows she doesn't need one more person who looks at her and sees a fortune instead of a face. She's got a whole building full of those." He didn't look at Marcus when he said it, but he didn't have to. What she needs, what everybody in this room needs and is too busy to admit, is one person who sees her. Not the empire, not the magazine covers. Her. The woman who buried someone she loved and kept getting up in the morning anyway. That's who I see. And if the price of seeing her is standing in a room full of people who've decided I'm a con man, then that's the cheapest thing I've ever paid for anything. The silence held for one more beat. And then from the edge of the room, a slow clap. One pair of hands. Walter Boyd. The silver-haired man from the gala, scotch in hand, clapping without hurry, his lined face split by a grin. "Well?" he said to nobody and everybody. "That's the first true thing anyone said at one of these in a decade. And the strangest thing happened. A few other people joined him. Not everyone. Marcus's crowd stayed frozen, and there were plenty of pursed lips and cold eyes. But enough. Enough that Marcus's face went from smug to red, and he looked around for the audience that had abandoned him and found it wasn't his anymore. "This is—" Marcus started and stopped, because there was no good way to finish it. He set his wine down hard. "This is theater. He's good. I'll give him that. He's very good. Marcus." Victoria's voice cut through the room like a blade. She wasn't loud either. She didn't need to be. "You're done. Victoria, I'm only saying what everyone—" "You're done." She stepped forward, and there was the woman from the magazine covers, now the one who moved markets, except aimed like a weapon. "You've spent 3 weeks telling this building I've lost my judgment. Let me tell you what I've actually lost. I've lost my patience for men who mistake cruelty for insight. You asked why I'd choose him. She looked at Jordan, then back at Marcus, and her voice didn't waver. Because in 20 years of running this company, he is the only man who ever walked up to me and wanted nothing. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand that I could buy this entire room and everyone in it? And the one thing I could never once purchase, not for any price, was somebody who'd sit on a phone for an hour and let me talk about a child's loose tooth like it mattered more than a 9-figure deal. Her voice caught just slightly, and she pushed through it. He's worth more than every investor in this room. And if that costs me your good opinion, Marcus, then I promise you I have never made a better trade. Shote, Marcus stared at her, then at Jordan, then at the room that was no longer his. He set his jaw, muttered something no one quite heard, and walked out. And Jordan Mitchell stood in the middle of the wealthiest room in the city, next to the woman the whole country wanted a piece of, having said nothing but the truth, and realized that the room had turned not all of it, but enough of it the way rooms do, when someone finally says the thing everyone's been too careful to say. Walter made his way over, still grinning, and clapped Jordan on the shoulder. Son, I've been coming to these things for 30 years, and that's twice now you've made it worth the trip. He nodded at Victoria. Hold on to this one. He's the only honest man in the building, and honest men are load-bearing. You can build on them. And he wandered off to refresh his scotch, leaving the two of them standing in the wake of it. Victoria turned to Jordan. Her composure was back in place for the room, but her eyes weren't composed at all. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Do what? Defend me. To him. You could have defended yourself. That was the attack. It was aimed at you, at your name, at Rachel. And instead you spent the whole thing talking about what I need. Her voice wavered. Nobody does that. Nobody puts themselves in front of me. It's supposed to be the other way around. I'm the shield. I'm always the shield. Maybe you're tired of being the shield, Jordan said. She looked at him. You said it yourself on the balcony. You got hard because a company doesn't need you soft. You've been standing in front of everybody else for 20 years. Board investors, employees, the whole machine, all of them behind you. You out front taking the hits. He shrugged. I just thought maybe for once somebody could stand in front of you. That's all. It's not a big thing. Noah does it for me every night. Somebody should do it for you. And Victoria Hartwell, in the middle of her own investor event, in front of the people whose money she managed. The woman who never showed weakness felt her eyes fill, and this time she didn't fight it and didn't hide it, and let one tear go down her face in a room full of people who'd spent 20 years never once seeing her cry. I need some air, she said thick. Balcony, Jordan said. She laughed, wet and helpless. There's always a balcony. They found it. Every one of these places had one, and stepped out into the cold, and the noise of the room fell away behind them, and for a moment they just stood at the railing, the way they had that first night 6 weeks and a whole lifetime ago. It worked, Jordan said after a while. What did? Starving the column, not fighting it, and then walking in tonight and just being true. It worked. Marcus is gone. Half that room's on our side now. Half. Half's a lot. Half's more than we had this morning. He glanced at her. You want the other half, you'll have to give it time. People come around slow, but they come around when the thing they're watching turns out to be real. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Can I ask you something? And you have to answer it the way you answer Noah, plainly, no dressing it up. Okay? Is it real? She turned to face him. All the armor was off now, out here in the dark. Because I've been telling myself for 6 weeks, not to hope, not to be a fool, that a woman like me doesn't get to have this twice. And tonight, you stood in front of a room and defended me like I mattered. And I need to know if it's real, Jordan, or if I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life by letting myself believe it. So, plainly, is it real? Jordan looked at her for a long moment, and then instead of answering with words, he did the thing that men like him, careful men, grieving men, men who'd learned the hard way what it cost to hope almost never let themselves do. He reached out and took her hand. Just held it there on the railing in the cold. "I buried my wife 3 years ago," he said quietly, "and I did not think I would ever want to hold anybody's hand again as long as I lived. I made peace with that. I decided that part of me died with Rachel, and that was just the deal, and I'd pour everything I had left into my son, and that would be enough." His thumb moved once across the back of her hand. And then a bossy woman crossed out her real phone number on a card and handed it to a stranger, and now I sit on my back step every night like a teenager waiting for a phone to buzz. He looked at her. "Is it real? Victoria, I haven't wanted to hope in 3 years, and you made me hope. And hope is the most dangerous thing there is for a man who's already lost everything once. I wouldn't risk it if it wasn't real. I don't have enough left to risk it on something that isn't." Victoria's hand tightened around his. "That's real enough," she whispered. "That's real enough," he agreed. And they stood there on the balcony, two people who had each buried the person they thought was their one shot at it, holding hands in the cold, like the risk was worth it. And for the first time, both of them believed that it was. But even then, standing there with her hand in his, and the worst of the room behind them, Jordan felt it, the thing he'd learned to feel in 3 years of grief. The small, cold knowledge that the world does not let you keep the good moment for long. Because Victoria's phone was buzzing in her clutch, insistent, again and again, and when she finally pulled it out with her free hand and looked at the screen, he watched her face change. Watched the softness drain out of it, and the CEO come back sharp and pale. "What is it?" Jordan said. She didn't answer right away. She was reading fast, the way she read everything, and whatever it was bad. "Victoria." She looked up at him, and her voice was very steady, which he'd learned meant she was frightened. "The deal," she said. "The one that's been dying for 6 weeks, the 9-figure one." She swallowed. "It didn't die slow after all. It just died. Tonight, while we were in there." Her hand still in his had gone cold. "The lead investor pulled out an hour ago. And when the lead pulls out of something this size, the others follow, and when they follow..." She stopped. "Jordan, this could take the whole thing down with it. Not a department. The company. Everything I built. Everything I buried David to build." And Jordan Mitchell, holding the hand of a woman who had just watched her empire begin to fall, while she was on a balcony, learning how to hope again, understood that the world had just asked its oldest, cruelest question of him, the one it always asks, the man who says he doesn't care about the money. Now that she might have nothing, would he stay? She was already pulling her hand out of his, already turning back toward the door, already becoming the woman the situation required, and Jordan caught her by the wrist. Gently, but he caught her. "Victoria, I have to go in there. I have to get my team on the phone. I have to... Victoria, look at me. Jordan, I don't have time. 30 seconds. Give me 30 seconds, and then you can go run your war." He held her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Whatever happens in there tonight, whatever happens to the deal, the company, all of it, I am not going anywhere. I need you to know that before you walk back into that room, because you're about to spend the next 12 hours around people who are going to run the math on whether you're still worth their time. And I'm not one of them. The math doesn't change anything for me. There is no number where I leave." She stared at him. And for 1 second, one flicker, he saw it cross her face. The disbelief. The reflex of 20 years. Everyone leaves when the money goes. That's what the money is for. That's the only reason they stay. "You say that now," she said, and it came out harder than she meant it. "You say that standing on a balcony. But you don't understand what this could become, Jordan. If this goes the way it could go, I'm not talking about a bad quarter. I'm talking about the whole thing. Bankruptcy, lawyers, my name in every paper, and not the flattering way. The house, the cars, all of it could be, I could end up with nothing. Do you understand nothing?" "Good," Jordan said. Her head snapped up. "Good, you heard me." His voice was quiet and certain. "You've spent this whole thing convinced I'm going to leave when the money goes. Because you think the money's the reason I'm here. So let it go. Let all of it go if that's what happens. And watch me still be here in the morning. He let go of her wrist. You want to know if it's real? You just got the truest test there is, and I didn't ask for it, and I don't want it, and God knows I don't want it for you. But if the whole thing burns down, Victoria, then at the end of it, you'll finally have your answer. Because I'll be standing right there in the ashes, and there won't be a single dollar left to explain why. She looked at him for a long, long moment. Her phone was buzzing again in her hand. And something in her face, some 20-year-old lock, didn't open exactly, but shifted, loosened. Go, Jordan said. Go run your war. I'll take a cab home. Call me when you can. She went. Jordan took a cab home, and he did not sleep. He sat on his back step in the dark and waited for a phone that didn't buzz until 4 a.m., and when it did, Victoria's voice was flat and exhausted and scraped raw. It's bad, she said. Tell me. The lead investor was a man named Prescott. He controls a fund that anchored the entire development, a mixed-use project, 6 buildings, the biggest thing we've ever attempted. He pulled his commitment tonight and gave a reason that's, Jordan, the reason is the ugly part. A long breath. He said, and I'm quoting, that he had concerns about the stability of leadership. Concerns about me. He said he'd been hearing things, that my judgment was in question, that I'd become distracted and erratic. Jordan's stomach turned to ice. Marcus, he said. Marcus. She said the name like a wound. He's been on the phone for 3 weeks, Jordan, to the investors, whispering. Every time I thought he was just grumbling in the building, he was actually working the phones, telling anyone who'd listen that the CEO had lost her mind over you. And Prescott listened. And tonight, an hour after Marcus walked out of that room, humiliated in front of everyone, Prescott pulled the plug. It's not a coincidence. Marcus made a call. This is Marcus. Can you prove it? Proving it doesn't put the money back. That's the thing about this world. By the time you can prove someone knifed you, you've already bled out. She laughed, a terrible, tired sound. And here's the part that would be funny if it weren't the end of my company. He was right. That's what Prescott will say if anyone asks. I said her judgment was compromised, and look, she let her acquisitions head walk out the door in the middle of a crisis. Marcus manufactured the very instability he warned them about, and it worked because that's how it always works. How bad is it, really? The pause told him everything before she did. Without Prescott's anchor, the other 4 investors have 30 days to exercise a clause that lets them exit too. If they all go, and they will, they follow the anchor. They always follow the anchor, the development collapses. And it's so large, and we're so leveraged into it, that its collapse doesn't just kill the project. It could pull the whole company under with it. 30 days, Jordan. I have 30 days to find a way to save 6 buildings worth of financing, or watch 20 years of my life fall into a hole. Her voice finally cracked. David died so I could build this. That's the story I've told myself for 6 years. I couldn't save him, so I built something that would outlast me instead. And now I'm going to lose that too. I lose everything. Every single time I lose everything. You haven't lost it yet. Jordan. You haven't lost it yet. 30 days isn't nothing. 30 days is a lot of mornings. He stood up off the step, wide awake now, something old and long buried stirring in his chest. Tell me about the project. The 6 buildings. The mixed-use thing. Tell me everything about it. Why? Because I'm an architect, Victoria. Because before I stepped back, before all of it, this is what I did. 6 building mixed-use developments were my whole life. So tell me about it, and let me look at it, and maybe I don't know. Maybe there's nothing. But I've been designing buildings in my spare time for 3 years for no reason at all. And maybe the reason was this. He gripped the phone. Let me see the project. That's all I'm asking. Let me look. There was a silence on the line. You want to help me save my company? Victoria said slowly. The day after you told me you'd stay if I lost it. Both things are true. I'll stay if you lose it. And I'd rather you didn't. Those don't cancel out. He almost smiled. Send me the plans. I'll be up. Apparently I'm always up now. She sent him the plans, and Jordan Mitchell spread them across his kitchen table at 4:30 in the morning. The broken toaster shoved aside the weak coffee going cold and did the thing he had not done in 3 years. He worked. He really worked. He put on his glasses and pulled out the pencils he hadn't touched since before Rachel got sick, and he read every page of a project he had no business reading. And somewhere around dawn, when the light came gray through the kitchen window, he found it. He found the problem, and he thought the answer. He didn't call her. He drove to her office. He'd never been, but the address was on the plans, and he showed up at 7 a.m. with the rolled drawings under his arm and Noah's cereal still on his shirt because he hadn't stopped to change, and he told the security desk his name, and to his complete astonishment, they were expecting him. She'd left word, and they sent him up. Victoria looked like she hadn't slept because she hadn't. Her office was a war room. 6 people around a table, phones everywhere, the specific grim energy of smart people trying to stop a flood with their hands. She looked up when Jordan walked in, and something moved across her exhausted face. Surprise, and under it, something that looked almost like relief at just the sight of him. "Jordan, what are you—" "I found it." He crossed to the table and started unrolling his drawings right over the top of theirs, which made one of her people splutter, and he didn't care. The reason Prescott could walk. The reason he could call your judgment into question and make it stick. It's the project itself. Look. The room went quiet. 6 exhausted faces looked at a man in a cereal-stained shirt. "Your development," Jordan said, "is beautiful, and it's dead on arrival," and Prescott knew it, and that's why he could leave without looking like the villain. Because on paper, this thing is 6 luxury towers, high-end retail, premium residential. It's gorgeous, and it's exactly like the 40 other luxury developments going up in this city right now, and the market's saturated, and every sophisticated investor in the room knows the luxury segment is about to soften. Prescott didn't leave because of a whisper about your judgment. The whisper just gave him cover. He left because he looked at 6 more luxury towers in an oversupplied market, and he got scared, and he grabbed the first excuse that let him out clean. Marcus handed him the excuse. But the fear was already there. It was baked into the design. Victoria was staring at the drawings. "You've been looking at this for 3 hours, and I've been looking at buildings like this for 20 years. This is the only thing I know how to do." He pulled out his own sketches, rougher done overnight in pencil, and laid them on top. "So here's what I think. You don't save this project by finding a new Prescott to replace the old one. Because the next Prescott looks at the same saturated luxury market and gets the same scared and finds the same door. You save it by changing what the project is so that it stops being the 41st luxury development and becomes the only one of its kind." He tapped the sketches. "Mixed income, not mixed-use mixed income. You take these 6 towers, and instead of 6 identical luxury blocks, you make it a real neighborhood. Market rate units. Yes, you keep those, they fund it. But you weave in workforce housing. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, the people who actually run a city and can't afford to live in it anymore. You put a real school in the ground floor of Building 3, not a boutique daycare, an actual public partnership school. You put clinic space in Building 5. Community retail on the plaza, local businesses, not another chain coffee shop. You design it so that a firefighter and a fund manager ride the same elevator." He looked up at her. "And here's the thing, Victoria, that's not charity. That's the smartest financial move on this table. Because a mixed-income development at this scale qualifies for a whole layer of financing that luxury towers don't. Public bonds, tax incentives, federal and state programs that are desperate to fund exactly this and can't find developers willing to build it. You wouldn't be replacing Prescott's money. You'd be replacing it with something more stable than Prescott ever was, because government housing money doesn't get scared and walk in the night. It's patient. It's exactly the anchor you need." The room was dead silent. One of her people, a younger analyst, said quietly, "The incentive stack on something like that, at this scale, that's not just replacing the gap. That could overfund it." It could, Jordan said. If it's designed right, which is the part I can do. Victoria hadn't said the word. She was staring at his rough pencil sketches, 6 towers, reimagined as a living neighborhood, a firefighter and a fund manager in the same elevator, and Jordan couldn't read her face at all. Everybody out, she said. Her team looked up. Everybody out, 10 minutes, go. They filed out and the door closed, and then it was just the two of them, and the drawings spread across the table, and Victoria put both hands flat on the pages and leaned over them and was quiet for a long time. David wanted me to build things like this, she finally said. Jordan waited. When we were together. He was a teacher, I told you. He used to look at what my company built, all the luxury towers, all the glass, and he'd get this look. And once, just once, he said, you could house half the city with what you know how to do. And instead you build monuments for people who already have everything. It was the only cruel thing he ever said to me. And I got so angry I didn't speak to him for 2 days. Her voice was thick. And then he died, and I decided the way to honor him was to build bigger, more. A monument to prove I was worth what he saw in me. And I've spent 6 years building exactly the thing he criticized, telling myself it was for him. She looked up at Jordan, and her eyes were streaming now freely, no armor left at all. And you walk in here at 7 in the morning with cereal on your shirt and 3 hours of sleep, and you sketch the thing he actually wanted. The thing I've been too scared and too proud to build. You drew it overnight. Victoria. How did you know? She whispered. How did you know that's what would save me? Not the money. That. How did you know? Jordan came around the table. He stood in front of her, and he took the pencil out of her hand and set it down, and he held both her hands in both of his. Because you told me the first night, he said gently, on the balcony. You told me you loved a man who wouldn't let you pay for dinner because it made him feel like an employee instead of a partner. You told me the thing you couldn't buy was somebody who saw you. And I've been thinking about that for 6 weeks, and last night staring at these plans, it finally made sense to me. He squeezed her hands. You don't want to be saved, Victoria. You've never wanted to be saved. You want to build something that matters with somebody who matters, and have it mean something at the end. That's all David wanted for you. It's all I want for you. So I didn't design a rescue. I designed the thing you actually wanted. There's a difference, and you taught it to me, and I just handed it back. Victoria Hartwell, Billionaire, CEO. The woman who never wept in front of anyone, put her face against Jordan Mitchell's cereal-stained shirt and cried like something 20 years old was finally coming loose. I could still lose, she said into his chest. You know that. This is a plan. It's a good plan. It's a beautiful plan, but plans fail. The financing could fall through. The incentives could get tangled in bureaucracy for a year we don't have. Prescott could badmouth me to the public partners too. I could do all of this and still lose everything. You could, Jordan agreed, holding her. You keep agreeing with me when I say I could lose. Why do you keep agreeing? Because I'm not going to lie to you to make you feel better. You could lose. It's real. And I'm here anyway. Those two things are the whole point. He pulled back just enough to look at her. Rachel taught me something before she died. Near the end, when we both knew. She said the outcome was never the thing. She was going to die, and there was no version where the outcome was good, and she said the outcome was never the thing anyway. The thing was, who was in the room with you while you found out? That's what she said. Who's in the room? He wiped her face with his thumb. So let's go save your company, Victoria. And if we can't, if it all comes down anyway, then I'll be in the room while you find out. That's the promise. Not that you won't lose. That you won't lose alone. For 30 days they built it. It was the hardest month of Jordan's life since Rachel died, and in a strange way, the most alive he'd felt since before she got sick. He worked. He designed until 3 a.m. and drove Noah to school at 8:15 anyway, never missing one, and worked again. He and Victoria became a machine. She ran the money and the politics and the endless meetings with public officials, and he ran the design. The thing that made the money possible, The vision that turned a dying luxury project into a neighborhood no investor had ever seen the likes of. And slowly then quickly it worked. The public financing came in not all at once, but in the patient, stable way Jordan had promised. Layer on layer, bond, on incentive, on federal match, until the gap Prescott left wasn't just filled, but overfilled. A city desperate for exactly this kind of housing fell over itself to be part of it. 2 of the 4 remaining private investors who'd been ready to flee looked at the new numbers and the new story and stayed, because it turned out a firefighter and fund manager neighborhood was not just good conscience, but good business. The kind of legacy project that made investors look like heroes instead of speculators. Marcus's whisper campaign died the way the gossip column had died starved. Because you cannot convince people a woman has lost her judgment while she is executing the boldest and smartest pivot the industry has seen in a decade. The narrative simply stopped being available. Prescott Jordan Hurd tried to get back in near the end, once the thing was clearly going to work, and Victoria Jordan was there when she took the call, said 7 words of her own that he thought would make Rachel proud. "The window for your money has closed." And she hung up. But the part Jordan carried with him long after wasn't the deal coming together. It was a Tuesday night in the middle of it, the 2 of them at his kitchen table at 11 p.m. surrounded by plans, and Noah, who was supposed to be asleep, padding out in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Dad? Hey, bud, you should be asleep." "I heard voices." Noah looked at Victoria. He'd met her twice now carefully, the way Jordan had insisted slowly, no pressure, no announcements. Noah studied her the way he studied everything seriously, weighing it. "You're the building lady." "I'm the building lady." Victoria agreed, and Jordan watched her go. Still watched the CEO, who could face down a boardroom, suddenly terrified of an 8-year-old's verdict. "My dad's helping you," Noah said. "He is. He's helping me a lot. Your dad is very, very good at what he does." Noah nodded, slowly absorbing this. Then he came around the table and climbed into the chair next to Victoria uninvited and looked at the plans spread out in front of her. "Which building is which?" he said. "And Victoria Hartwell." The woman who'd told Jordan on a balcony that not one person on earth would stay awake to make sure she came home, leaned over and started explaining a 6-building mixed-income development to an 8-year-old in his pajamas, patiently, seriously answering every impossible question he asked. And he asked dozens because that was Noah. And Jordan stood at his own kitchen counter watching them and had to turn around and grip the edge of the sink because the feeling in his chest was too big to have with his face pointed at the room. Later, after Noah had finally fallen asleep in the chair against Victoria's arm mid-question, she looked down at the boy and then up at Jordan, and she whispered so as not to wake him. "He fell asleep on me." "I see that. He's not standing guard tonight." Jordan came over quietly and looked at his son asleep and unworried, leaning on a woman who 6 weeks ago had been the loneliest person he'd ever met. "No," Jordan said softly. "He's not." And they understood, both of them, without saying it, exactly what that meant, that the boy who stayed awake every night to make sure his last parent wouldn't disappear had fallen asleep unguarded, unafraid, because for the first time in 3 years, the room had enough people in it that he didn't have to hold it up alone. But the guilt still came for Jordan. It always did. That same night, after he'd carried Noah to bed and walked Victoria to her car, he stood alone in his kitchen among the plans and felt it rise. The old accusation sharper now than it had been in months, precisely because things were good. "How dare you? How dare you feel this? How dare you build a life with another woman at the table where you and Rachel used to sit? What kind of man forgets his wife this easily?" He must have been standing there a long time because he didn't hear Victoria come back in. She'd forgotten her phone until she was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching his face. "You've got the look," she said quietly. "The one you get. Talk to me." "It's nothing." "Jordan, we don't do 'it's nothing.' That was never the deal." She came and stood in front of him. "Talk to me." And Jordan, who had sworn off lies, told her the truth. "I feel like I'm betraying her," he said, and his voice broke on it. Rachel, right now, standing here. It's the best I've felt in 3 years, and that's exactly the problem, because the better I feel, the more it feels like I'm leaving her behind. Like being happy means she didn't matter enough. Like if I really loved her, I'd still be... He stopped. His hands were shaking. She died 3 years ago, and I'm standing in our kitchen falling for another woman, and I don't know how to do both. I don't know how to love you and not feel like I'm abandoning her, and I've been carrying it this whole time and not saying it. And tonight, watching Noah fall asleep on you, it got so loud I could hardly... Victoria took his face in both her hands. Listen to me, she said, because I know this. I know exactly this. I've lived on the other side of it for 6 years. Her eyes held his. I couldn't give away David's... I told you the dress, but it's not just the dress. It's all of it. I couldn't move his coat from the hook by my door for 4 years, because moving the coat felt like saying he was really gone. And you know what I finally understood? Moving the coat didn't make him gone. He was already gone. The coat was just a coat, and keeping myself frozen next to it wasn't loyalty, Jordan. It was just grief pretending to be love. Jordan's eyes were streaming now. Moving forward doesn't mean leaving her behind, Victoria said, fierce and gentle at once. It means carrying her with you into the part of your life she doesn't get to see. That's not betrayal. That's the opposite of betrayal. You loved her so well that you learned how to love, really love, the 2 in the morning kind, the kind that shows up. And now you have all of that in you, and it doesn't disappear when you point it somewhere new. It grew. She grew it in you. Every good thing you'll ever do for me, you can do, because Rachel taught you how. That's not abandoning her, Jordan. That's her still being here. That's the most alive she can possibly be. Jordan pulled her against him and held on like a man in deep water finding ground. How do you know that? He whispered into her hair. How do you know that? Because I just now learned it, she whispered back. From you. From watching you love that little boy and love your dead wife and somehow still have room for me. You taught it to me tonight and I handed it back. There's a difference, and you showed me, remember? And they stood there in the kitchen with the 2-week coffee and the broken toaster and the plans for 6 buildings that would house half a city, 2 people who had each buried the one they thought was their only chance, and understood at last that they had not been given a replacement for what they'd lost. They'd been given a way to carry it forward. A month to the day after Prescott walked, the financing closed. The neighborhood was going to be built. The company was saved, not just saved, but transformed, pointed at last toward the thing its founder had always secretly wanted it to be. Victoria called Jordan the moment the last signature landed. He was in the school pickup line 315 waiting for Noah. We did it, she said, and she was laughing and crying at once. It's done. It's real. It's going to get built, Jordan. Every building, the school, the clinic, all of it. We did it. You did it, he said. We did it. Don't you dare take yourself out of this. We. A breath. Jordan, I want you to build it, not consult. Build it, lead architect, your name on it, the whole thing. I want the man who saved it to be the man who raises it out of the ground. Jordan sat in his 9-year-old car in the pickup line and looked through the windshield at the doors of his son's school. The doors he'd watched close every morning for 3 years. The doors he still didn't drive away from until they shut, and he felt 3 years of stepping back, of making himself smaller, of pouring everything into survival crack open and let something in. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Okay, I'll build it. His voice thickened. On one condition. Name it. Noah gets to help design the playground. He's got opinions, strong ones. You've heard him. Victoria laughed, that unguarded sound he'd first heard on a balcony and now heard every day. Deal, she said. Tell him it's a contract. Tell him we shook on it. And through the windshield, the doors of the school opened, and children poured out into the afternoon, and among them backpack bouncing. Scanning the line for the car he knew would be there because it was always there, came Noah, who'd stopped standing guard at night because the room finally had enough people in it. He spotted the car. His whole face lit up. He ran. And Jordan Mitchell, architect, widower, father, and a man who had against everything he'd believed possible, started living again, put down the phone, and opened the door, and went to meet his son. They broke ground on a Saturday in the fall, 1 year, almost to the week, from the night Jordan Mitchell cracked the ice in a water glass and told the richest woman in America that her money didn't impress him. He hadn't wanted a ceremony. Victoria had insisted, and for once Jordan lost the argument because she pointed out correctly that the whole point of the project was that it belonged to more people than the two of them, and those people deserved to stand on the ground and watch it begin. So there was a ceremony. Folding chairs on a cleared lot. A podium. A few hundred people who had in one way or another made it real. The city officials who'd fought for the financing. The future residents who'd been selected in the first housing lottery. The construction crews. The small local businesses who'd signed on for the plaza retail. And in the front row in a small suit, he'd chosen himself and refused all help with sat Noah, 9 years old, now holding a rolled-up piece of paper across his knees like it was the most important document in the world, because to him it was. It was the playground. "You're going to be up there," Jordan had told him that morning, kneeling to fix a collar that didn't need fixing. "When they call me, you come up too. You show them your design. You earned it. What if I mess up? You won't. But what if I do?" Jordan had looked his son in the eyes, Rachel's eyes, the light coming in the same way it always did. "Then you'll mess up in front of a few hundred people, and the world will keep spinning, and I'll still be the proudest man in this whole city. There's no version of today where I'm not proud of you. That's not up for grabs. That one's already decided." Noah had thought about that seriously, the way he thought about everything. "Okay," he'd said. "Deal." Now Victoria stood at the podium, and Jordan watched her from the side, and he thought about how far the woman had traveled from the marble figure surrounded by reaching hands he'd first seen across a ballroom. She still wore the good suits. She still moved markets with a phone call. But something in her had unlocked and stayed unlocked, and you could see it in the way she talked to the crowd. Not down at them, not through them, but to them like they were people, because she'd remembered they were. "6 years ago," she said, "I lost someone who told me I could house half the city with what I knew how to do, and instead I built monuments for people who already had everything." A pause. "It took me 6 years and one very stubborn architect to understand he was right." A ripple of laughter. "This project is what he wanted. It's what I should have been building all along. And it exists because a man walked up to me at a party and told me my money didn't impress him, and then spent a year proving that the things that actually matter can't be bought at any price." She found Jordan in the crowd. "So, I'd like to bring up the lead architect, the man who turned 6 luxury towers into a neighborhood. Jordan Mitchell, and his partner in design," she added, smiling, "who is 9 and who I'm told has strong opinions about swing sets." The crowd laughed and applauded, and Jordan walked up with his hand on Noah's shoulder, and the boy carried his rolled paper to the podium like a herald carrying a proclamation. Jordan hadn't planned to say much. He wasn't a man who liked podiums, but he stood there looking out at the faces, the future residents, the officials. Denise beaming in the 3rd row with a hand pressed to her mouth. Walter Boyd near the back with the same scotch and a grin energy he'd had a year ago at the gala, and he found there was something he needed to say, and he said it. "A little over a year ago," Jordan began, "I was a man who'd decided his best days were behind him. The lot went quiet. I lost my wife 3 years before that, Rachel. Some of you knew her. She taught 2nd grade over at Lincoln, and if your kid went through her class, you know exactly the kind of person I lost." A few nods in the crowd, a few soft sounds. "When she died, I stopped. I stopped chasing anything. I turned down the big jobs. I told myself it was for my son, and it was partly it really was. But part of it was that I decided I didn't get to want things anymore. That wanting things was for people who hadn't learned yet how much it costs when you lose them." He paused. "I was wrong about that. But I want to be honest because I made a promise to myself a while back to only ever say true things, and here's a true thing. I didn't climb out of that on my own. I got pulled out. By a boy who stood guard over me every single night so I wouldn't disappear. He looked at Noah. By a sister who bullied me into a suit and out the door. By a stubborn woman who crossed out her real phone number on a card and handed it to a stranger. He looked at Victoria, and by a chance to build something that was actually worth building. All I did was say yes. That's the whole secret. When life comes back around and offers you a way to start living again, you just have to be brave enough to say yes. He stepped back a little and put his hand on his son's shoulder. Now, my partner has a playground to show you, and I'd warn you all in advance, he's going to answer every question you might have, and probably several you didn't know you had. That's just how he's built. And Noah unrolled his paper and stood on the little step stool someone had thought to put behind the podium and showed a few hundred people his design for the playground at the center of the neighborhood, a design with, among other things, a fort. A real fort. Big enough for lots of kids at once, he explained, so that no one ever had to play in it alone. He'd been very specific about that part with the actual architects, he told the crowd, and they'd promised to keep it, and a promise was a contract. Jordan watched his son explain the fort to a rapt audience, and beside him, Victoria slipped her hand into his, and he thought not for the first time that grief had lied to him. Grief had told him 3 years running that the best of his life was over. And here it was, the best of his life, standing on a step stool in a small suit, describing a fort where no child would have to play alone. The building went up over the following months, and Jordan built it the way he'd once built everything back before he'd stepped away fully with his whole self in it. But it was different now, and he knew why. Before Rachel died, he'd built things to be admired. Now, he built things to be lived in. It turned out to be a better way to build. The two purposes had never really been in conflict. He just needed to lose almost everything to learn which one mattered. He and Victoria didn't rush. That had been the promise from the beginning, made on a balcony a year before, and they kept it. There was no dramatic proposal that first year, no grand announcement. There was instead a slow and deliberate braiding of two lives that had each learned to be careful. Victoria came to Noah's school events, standing a little back at first, then not back at all. Jordan learned the rhythms of her world and refused gently and completely to be swallowed by it. He kept his small house, kept the broken toaster as a kind of joke between them, now kept driving Noah to school at 8:15, and never once pulled away before the doors closed, even when a lead architect with his name on a landmark development had 100 reasons he could have delegated the school run. "You could hire a driver," Victoria said to him once, watching him get ready for the morning trip. "I could." "Why don't you?" Jordan had looked at her. "Because someday he's going to be 16, and he's going to be embarrassed to be seen with me, and he's going to want to take the bus. And when that day comes, I want to have had every single one of these mornings. I want the whole account full, so that when he doesn't need me to watch him walk in anymore, I can look back and know I never missed one. Not one." He'd shrugged. "A driver would save me 20 minutes a day. But 20 minutes a day is the whole thing, Victoria. 20 minutes a day is a childhood." She hadn't argued. She'd married a man who understood that eventually, because eventually there was a wedding, a small one, nothing like the billion-dollar spectacle the magazines had predicted when they'd first sniffed out the story. It was in the courtyard of the finished development a year and a half after they'd broken ground surrounded by the neighborhood. They'd built real people living real lives in the buildings around them. A firefighter and a fund manager who genuinely did it turned out ride the same elevator. Denise cried. Walter Boyd gave a toast that was mostly a story about the gala and the cracked ice, and it brought the house down. Noah 10 by then was the best man and took the job with the exact seriousness you'd expect, and delivered a speech that consisted mainly of the observation that his dad used to look sad all the time and didn't anymore, and that Noah had decided this was a good trade. And when it came time for the vows, Jordan looked at Victoria and did the thing he always did, the thing that had started it all. He told the truth. "I need to say something about somebody who isn't here," he said, "because she's the reason I know how to do this at all." A hush. "Rachel taught me how to love another person, all the way down the 2 in the morning kind, the kind that shows up. I thought when I lost her, I lost that too. I thought it went in the ground with her." He took Victoria's hands. "But you told me once that moving forward doesn't mean leaving someone behind. That it means carrying them into the part of your life they don't get to see. So I want to say out loud in front of everyone on this day I'm carrying her with me. Rachel's here. She's in every good thing I know how to do, and she'll be in every good thing I ever do for you. And that's not a shadow over this. It's the foundation under it. You can't build anything real without a foundation." He smiled a little wet. "And I know a thing or two about foundations." Victoria was crying and laughing, and she said, "You would find a way to make a wedding vow about architecture. I contain multitudes. You contain exactly one architect and one very stubborn heart. That's the multitude." They were married in the courtyard of the neighborhood they'd built, and it was, Denise said afterward, the only wedding she'd ever been to where the setting meant more than the money, because for once, the two people getting married had built the ground they were standing on with their own hands and their own beliefs, and you could feel it. The years went on the way years do. The development won awards the kind Jordan had once designed his whole life to win, and now genuinely didn't care about, which was probably why they came. It became a model. Other cities called. Other developers who'd spent years building the 41st luxury tower looked at what Victoria Hartwell's company had done and started to wonder if there was another way, a better way. And some of them tried it, and it worked for them too. And slowly, not all at once, but slowly, the way real change always comes. A small crack ran through an industry that had convinced itself that housing was only ever a monument for people who already had everything. Victoria never became the marble figure again. She'd tell the story sometimes at events when she was asked how her company had transformed itself, and she always told it the same way, and she always started it the same way. "A man told me my money didn't impress him," she'd say. "And it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it meant that for the first time in 20 years, someone was going to tell me the truth." And Marcus was gone. Of course, long gone, but here was the thing Jordan had come to understand in the quiet years after the story was never really about beating Marcus. Marcus was just the voice of a whole world that looks at a man with a broken toaster standing next to a woman with a fortune and decides before it knows a single true thing exactly what the story must be. Jordan hadn't beaten that world. You don't beat it. You just refuse day after day to let it tell you who you are. And if you refuse long enough and live true enough, the world eventually runs out of ways to argue with the evidence of your actual life. Noah grew up. He did in fact hit an age where he was embarrassed to be seen with his father right around 14, right on schedule. And he did start taking the bus. And Jordan let him without a word of complaint because the account was full. Every morning was in it. 3 years of them from the hardest time, and then years more from the good time, and not one missing. When the day came that his son didn't need to be watched into the building anymore, Jordan could look back across all of it and know with total certainty that he'd been there for every door that ever closed. It was the proudest thing he owned, and it had never cost him a dime, and no bank on earth could have sold it to him at any price. That had been the whole point, hadn't it? That had been the thing he'd said to a room full of the wealthiest people in the city a lifetime ago, in a low voice that made them all lean in. There are things money cannot create. He'd spent the rest of his life proving it not with speeches, but with mornings. And here is the part Jordan thought about most in the end. In the quiet years when Noah was grown, and the neighborhood they'd built was full of children who'd never known it any other way. He thought about the boy who stood guard. He thought about the 5-year-old who'd stayed awake every night terrified doing the only thing his small mind could invent to keep his last parent from disappearing, and how one ordinary Tuesday that boy had fallen asleep against a woman's arm in the middle of a question unguarded, unafraid because the room finally had enough people in it. Jordan had turned around and gripped the edge of a sink that night so his face wouldn't show what his chest was doing. He'd known even then that it was the most important thing that had happened in the whole story. Not the deal, not the wedding, not the awards. That. A frightened child finally able to sleep, because that was what the whole thing had been about from the very first cracked ice cube to the last. Not money, and not the rejection of money. Not proving a smug man wrong. Not even in the end, romance. It was about a handful of broken people who'd each decided in their own grief that they had to hold up the whole weight of the world alone. A widower standing guard over his career, a billionaire standing guard over her heart, a little boy standing guard over his father's life, and the slow, miraculous discovery that they didn't have to. That you could set the weight down, that the room could have enough people in it, that the thing you couldn't buy at any price, the thing worth more than a fortune, the thing money could not create and could not fix and could not replace, was simply this someone who sees you when nobody else does and stays. Jordan Mitchell had walked into a ballroom a year into a grief he thought was permanent, and told the truth to a stranger, and the truth had cracked something open, not in her at first, but in him. He'd spent 3 years surviving. Making school lunches, fixing broken toys, watching his son into the building, carrying the heavy thing and smiling so a child wouldn't feel its weight, just surviving. And then one night, he set a glass down hard enough to crack the ice, and said 7 true words, and everything that had been frozen in him for 3 years began at last to thaw. He had told her the truth. Her money didn't impress him. But the deeper truth, the one it took a whole life to prove, was that a person's worth was never in what they owned. It was in who they were when no one was watching, in the promises they kept when keeping them cost something, in whether they showed up at 2 a.m. and at 8:15 and at every ordinary Tuesday in between, in whether when someone they loved was losing everything they stayed. Jordan stayed. He stayed when the money was there, and he'd have stayed if it had all burned down, and everyone who knew the whole story understood that those 2 facts were the entire point of the man. And the boy who once lay awake in the dark standing guard so his last parent wouldn't disappear grew up in a house where nobody had to stand guard anymore because his father had proved with a whole life and not a single speech that the people worth loving are the ones who stay. Jordan Mitchell had stopped surviving a long time ago. He'd started living the night he told the truth, and he never once looked back.